You're watching Entre Nous. Now, if you've ever visited Paris and taken a walk along the Seine, you may have noticed the houseboats, or péniches as we call them here in French, on the banks of the river. Who lives in these iconic floating homes, and what's it like to live in one? Well, to tell us more, we can bring in Hilbren Buys, captain on the Seine and the founders of the Fête du Bateau, a now annual tradition inspired by the Paris Summers Olympics flotilla. Hilbren, thank you so much for joining us on the program today. How attached are you to the river?
So thank you very much. Yes, I'm a captain on small pleasure craft in Paris, and I was delighted to see the attention that was brought to the river with the event last year and the general Sequanian community. And I navigate on the Seine almost daily, and this is something that gave me great attachment to the Seine. In fact, I'd say the Seine is the way that I fell in love with Paris.
Do you live on the Seine?
You'd imagine I do, but I don't live in a houseboat. The experience that I have about houseboats derives principally from the fact that I worked for companies whose offices were on floating establishments, these péniches. And so I even managed to work my way up to becoming the nautical infrastructure manager for two of these units on the water.
So what's it like to live on a houseboat?
Living on a houseboat, well, it evokes something romantic, and people have this idea that it could be intimate and cozy, and that you have this feeling of being part of a crew and everything. At the same time, you have these visions of the possibility, even though your boat may not be able to and you'll never actually do it, of being able to cast off and going to the furthest harbors and ports of the world. And that's the romance that gives people an attraction for houseboats. On a daily basis, you have maintenance, insects, your infrastructure floats, you have dampness. These are things that come in company with the fact that it's fun, romantic, and a beautiful way of living, actually.
So talk about, in terms of, is it like an investment, like you buy an apartment which potentially one day will have resale value? Is it the same for a houseboat?
It's a very different environment. So once you enter in the domain of houseboats, actually what you're going to look at is that you're not dealing with anything that's tangible or real estate. You're operating in an environment that's the public domain. In most countries, rivers belong to nobody, but are organized or are managed by some entity within the state. It could be a ministry, an agency, a private organization under mandate from the government. And in the case of the Seine, which is the river we're talking about, it would either be the Waterways of France, which is an authority, or the Port Authority of Paris, of the Paris Port, depending on which sections of the river it is. These will offer the ability, so they will be able to provide a convention of temporary occupation, which basically means a slip, just like a parking spot when you park your car on the roadway, and that needs to be paid.
I have a question, just a practical question.
Yes.
Because, you know, when you live in an apartment, you have to get rid of your garbage, do these sort of practical things. But when you live on a houseboat, you have to also worry about the waste, human waste, getting rid of that. Who does that in a place like Paris?
So according to the law and the regulations, all houseboats and boats navigating on or occupying space on the rivers need to be somehow attached to a reservoir and a sewage system, but that hasn't been enforced so far because the infrastructure isn't there.
And what about the practical aspects of heating? Because walking by the Seine in winter is very beautiful, but it's very cold when you're in the open. And living on the river means a lot of heating, so clearly it's more expensive than heating in an apartment.
A hull will be more difficult to insulate, so there are different solutions to that depending on how modern your boat is or how it's been designed. City infrastructure such as the post and rubbish collection will still need to be paid, so you'll still have a residential tax even though you're not living in a house. Your children may be going to school, so you have these taxes continue to exist. What you don't have is property tax, but what replaces the property tax is that you pay your mooring fees to the Port Authority or the authority of the river.
So would you consider one day living on the Seine yourself?
The prospect is tempting. However, it sounds very marvelous, but it's also very whimsical. And I think that ultimately my reason will always prevail over the romanticism of the project. And it also depends on people very privately. If you're a young couple, you have difficulty gaining access to traditional real estate, but you've perhaps lived on one, you have experience, or this is a project you're ready to engage in, it suddenly becomes more realistic. And in my case, I'm just happy working on the Seine and going home. to my apartment.
Fantastic stuff, Hilbren. Thank you so much for coming in and speaking to us about the joys of and the practicalities of potentially living on the Seine. Hilbren Buys there. And that's it for this edition of Entre Nous.